So anyway, that's part of the background that I come from, is kind of a very poor and modest family who wouldn't allow themselves the luxury of having like nice things. I mean, that was out of the question, and that attitude becomes kind of a vicious cycle, you know. So when people deny themselves good things, they have to justify that denial. And that's one thing if they limit that perspective to themselves. But often they project that conclusion onto other people. So for example, somebody who's miserable and denies themselves a good life, they usually justify that, but they also project that justification onto other people so that if they see you or if they see me, you know, enjoying life, then whatever justification they've used to be miserable, you are now guilty of violating that justification. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, apparently coming to you live to talk about what I'm just casually titling as the next health homework, which is for you to go, here's your assignment. Your assignment is to go buy something that you enjoy in the category of art, simply because you enjoy it and because you deem yourself worthy of having beautiful things in your life. So, as some of you know, I've been on a bit of an art kick lately. Part of that was because we went to Mexico and I went to a bunch of antique shops and I either bought things or I didn't buy things, but I did buy a few things that I like and they were pretty cheap. Good art doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't mean that you or I are living some, you know, flamboyant lifestyle just to buy some art. You know, like I described recently in the other video that I did on art. Like I just bought this thing totally spontaneously. I don't even remember what I paid for it, but I'm guessing it was less than $100. I'm guessing it was like $80 maybe, or maybe less. I don't know. It was in Mexican pesos. So then I had to do the math. And anybody who knows me knows that I suck at math. So anyway, I bought it and I enjoyed it. I went to a different market in Mexico City that was just fantastic. It was absolutely the best antique market I've ever seen in my life. It was huge, a lot of different stalls and stores. And I didn't buy anything. But I sure as hell looked at a lot of stuff that I wanted to buy. So anyway, that kind of got me on an art kick, and I bought a few pieces recently. I bought a piece a couple of days ago from Paris, apparently. It looked like it had actually been painted in Paris because it was just a streetscape of the Red Mill Theater, as some of you would be familiar with, Moulin Rouge, which I actually went to. And of course, I'd forgotten all about it. But I did go there with a friend of mine he was a friend at the time. He was a business friend. He wasn't a real friend. But that was back in like 2012. We went there and it was kind of stupid, I think. But anyway, I saw this thing and I bought it. I think I paid $5 for it. But, and it was actually out in the rain getting ruined. So I kind of saved it from the owner. So anyway, like I was saying, I've been on kind of an art kick lately. And as I also just said, it doesn't mean spending a lot of money. I mean, sometimes it's $80, sometimes it's $5. I bought a big, again, this was at the same place where this art was being ruined. But I did buy a big print, and it was a pretty good quality print. It had an okay frame on it. And I think I paid $50 for it, and it's huge. So anyway, it was of a woman. It was of a woman doing something kind of stereotypically masculine, so to speak. And it just provided a different perspective on a common theme that kind of gave me pause to reconsider that theme, because it's a hunting theme. And in fact, you can see this piece of art directly behind me. I'm pointing to it. I just put that up last night because that's a new one that I bought. And it's a hunting theme of a guy like out on horses with his dogs, you know, hunting dogs or whatever. So I did buy that one, but the other one that I bought for like 50 bucks is the same idea, but it's a woman. And I thought, wow, that kind of surprised me. And so that's why I bought it, because it was a woman instead of a man doing a hunting thing. So in the process of looking at art and buying art lately, completely to my surprise, what's come up for me around that is thinking about like my family and my life and things that I wanted and didn't get, or things that I got and didn't want, maybe. But it's been kind of like this therapeutic process. I didn't really expect that. You know, just like when I went and found this piece, you know, we were just walking around this little town in Mexico, and I went into this store and I saw this, and like the first thought that came to me was like, wow, that guy could have been my uncle. Which made me think about my real uncles and the things that they either provided or mostly didn't. So anyway, like I've said before, the whole thing was kind of spontaneous, but ultimately kind of therapeutic for me. So that's why I put together today's video, and you'll see that as soon as I finish up this quick intro. Another thing, oh yeah, I guess this is another piece for me around this. A lot of people think of art. Well, first of all, like, some people don't care about art. Whatever. But even for people who care about art, they often think of it as kind of an extravagance to have art in their own lives, right? So some people will say they don't care about art and they like, you know, drinking Budweiser and eating at McDonald's, and that's whatever life they want. And I grew up with those people. I mean, my grandfather lived in a shack on the Gulf Coast of what used to be the Gulf of Mexico. Maybe it still is the Gulf of Mexico. But he just survived off of his, you know, Navy pension from World War II. And I'm sure he did, you know, he had just little trinkets of garbage in his house, but he didn't have like any art. And so, you know, on my mom's side of the family, coming from a really poor background, you know, art, or even the idea of art, let alone anything from Europe, I mean, that was just considered completely extravagant, to the point of being like offensive. Somehow that was offensive to the family to even think of like having art. I mean, art was pretty much out of the question, unless it was kind of modest. But very clearly, like the whole idea of anything related to Europe was out of the question for like my mom's kind of generation, because they were all World War II survivors, and they survived the Great Depression, and they were all depressed. So anyway, that's part of the background that I come from, is kind of a very poor and modest family, who wouldn't allow themselves the luxury of having like nice things. I mean, that was out of the question. And that attitude becomes kind of a vicious cycle, you know. So when people deny themselves good things, they have to justify that denial. And that's one thing if they limit that perspective to themselves. But often they project that conclusion onto other people. So for example, somebody who's miserable and denies themselves a good life, they usually justify that, but they also project that justification onto other people, so that if they see you, or if they see me, you know, enjoying life, then whatever justification they've used to be miserable, you are now guilty of violating that justification. So you may have to play that back just to get it. I may have to play it back just to make sure I get that, but that's the way it occurs to me. So one of the things I said recently to a group of friends that we were sitting around a campfire, and these were all adults, at least by age, And one of the things I said to the group, actually, the conversation was about this jacket. I hadn't thought about that until right now. But one of the guys, he's like almost 90 years old, and he's an old pilot, a commercial airline pilot, and experimental airplane pilot. He's crashed like 11 times, but he obviously survived it. And this is kind of an aviation style jacket. And so he was a pilot. So I let him wear my jacket for the time that we were out there by the campfire. And I think he asked about the history or where did I get the jacket. So I told him about the jacket. It was just kind of a spontaneous thing. It was actually, just to clarify the story, it was to show you how spontaneous it was. We were in Barcelona walking around, passing the Gracia, which is a really beautiful street in Barcelona. I mean, Barcelona is beautiful. So imagine a beautiful street within a beautiful city. Passing the Gracia, and right at that moment, we were making a left turn to go to just on a little side street. No, I'm sorry, we were on Rambla de Gracia, and then we turned to Paseo de Gracia, or Passing de Gracia. So kind of a smaller street next to a bigger street. And right when we were making that turn, I was telling Paula, my wife, I was saying how happy I was and how I didn't need anything. And, I was totally satisfied and I didn't feel like I needed to buy anything. But if I was going to buy something, I would buy it in that neighborhood just because it was really nice. And so as soon as we made one turn, and then the following corner was a man's clothing store. And that's where I saw this jacket. And even though I had just said, 50 steps ahead, I just said, I don't need anything. I went in that store and I saw this jacket and I said, man, I got to have that. So that's what I did. So that's the story of this jacket. Anyway, we're sitting around the campfire and this old pilot sees my, aviation style jacket and he asked me about it. And I said, well, try it on. He's a little guy. So it was obviously too big for him. But the conversation that we got into around that time, I said, I bought it and I told them the story that I just told you, but the conclusion that I came to was to say, I said, as adults, we're obligated to be happy and we're obligated to live a decent life, and occasionally, sometimes that means buying things that you need or buying things that you want or buying things that you just say, fuck it, I want it, And you don't have to justify that. And I said, the reason that I feel like we as adults are obligated to be happy and to live a good life, etc., is because if we don't, we'll rationalize our own misery and we'll rationalize our own suffering. And then when we see other people happy, we'll condemn them by our own standards and by our own judgment, even if it's a mistake. And make them wrong for being happy. And that's perverted. I mean, that's sick. And I think maybe the last thing I'll say about that is, again, kind of reflecting on the process of looking at art and buying art and, looking at something, for example, and being neutral about it maybe at first, and then realizing, hey, that actually does have meaning for me. But at some point in the process of evaluating something that is for sale, I have to eventually say, well, I'm either going to buy it or I'm not. But part of that purchase process, also requires some level of justification. Let's say it's $100 or $1,000 or whatever. I don't want to go. I don't want to, and I can't and shouldn't. And I don't have a desire to go, throwing money around. So, if it's cheap, I'll buy it. If it's $5, like I said about that painting from Paris, yeah, $5. The other one was, huge. I think it was $50. Yeah, I can buy it. The other thing is, around that particular piece, like I said, it was the main protagonist in that particular picture, even though it's a hunting theme, kind of a masculine theme, it's a woman. Who's the star of the image. And the reason I bought that is because I don't want all my stuff to just be about men, even though it is almost all about men. that's because I'm a man and I like masculine stuff. But this particular piece kind of spoke to me on a couple different levels. Maybe I'll talk about that another time. But also because, I mean, I have women in my life. My wife, I'm sure she doesn't want to just see, paintings of men all the time. And maybe she wants some inspiration, whether she knows it or not. But my sister-in-law, she didn't have any art in her life, and maybe she wants to see some art every once in a while that has, a woman in there or something like that. So anyway, I bought it. I assume that when I'm dead, that, my family, extended family, distant family, whatever family I have, they'll inherit my stuff. So I want, some of it's kind of thinking about, well, I think about that. I mean, who's going to inherit my stuff? And what will it mean to them? And maybe it doesn't mean anything, or maybe it'll mean something just because it was mine, but then that would imply that I have to mean something to them as well. So anyway, bringing closure to this, I know this is the last thing, and I just thought of this morning, but again, in the process of buying art and kind of thinking about what does it mean to me, or what does it represent to me? And sometimes it's totally radical and spontaneous. I'm going to say two more things. One is about a piece of art, and then the other thing's about my own family that I've realized through the process of looking at art. And it's not like I have some shortage of, reflection or psychotherapy. I've certainly done a lot of work around my own family. So I'm kind of surprised by the fact that just going into art stores has kind of opened up a new level of thinking about my own past and future and present and family and mother and father and all this, uncles and all this kind of stuff. I wasn't expecting any of that. Like I said, when I bought that piece in Mexico, it turned out to be Leon Gambetta. But I wasn't thinking about my family when I walked in there. And then I looked at this guy and I was like, wow, there's something in there for me. Just like I looked at another piece of art the other day, and it was a picture of like, I don't know the history, and it was a little bit abstract. It wasn't super, super clear. It was beautiful. The texture on it was amazing, but it was apparently like a bunch of so-called Black or African American, like I guess villagers or something like that, on a coastline, getting into boats and getting off of boats. And these were just, modest to large sailboats, but they weren't slave ships. They weren't even fishing ships. And again, it was a little bit abstract, so the details weren't super clear. But I looked at it and I thought, wow, that's a beautiful piece of art. And then I saw the texture and I was like, wow, it's not simply color, it's also the texture, like the dimensionality of the paint itself. And then I was looking at it more, and I don't even know what the setting was. It's not culturally clear. They're just sailboats. But they're big. They were bigger sailboats. They weren't just dinghies, with sails. But I'm guessing it was, some African coast or whatever. I just don't know. But anyway, and I don't really care about sailboats. But again, like for some reason, this piece just spoke to me, and I was like looking at it, and I was looking at it, and I was like, I had kind of a holy crap moment, and I thought, wow, this actually speaks to me. It speaks to me about my own family. And my own family has virtually nothing to do with sailboats, and especially like some African American, well, I'm sorry, probably not even African. It's not African American. Is African. Like that has nothing to do with me or my history necessarily, but like there was just some piece about that resonated for me, and I know what it is. I got it. I'll talk about it later, because it requires some contextualization. Actually, from Nietzsche. Oh, that's no surprise for most of you. But like I was looking at this bunch of Africans getting in and out of boats, and somehow that explained to me some things about my own family. Uh, so anyway, that was a total surprise. So anyway, closing this up with a few words about my own family. Uh, my mother and father were probably, or perhaps, or maybe, or whatever, probably two of the most miserable people I've ever known. Uh, and they divorced when I was real young, so it's not like they were, together feeding off of each other's misery, so to speak. I mean, they happened to be my parents. They happened to have divorced when I was very young, and they both happened to have been just miserable people. And the distinction there with their particular type of misery was that they both could have been very happy. My father certainly had the means and the opportunity to be very happy, and he wasn't. And my mother was exactly the same. She, lived the last 8 years of her life. Yeah, the last 8 years of her life, she lived with us in Spain. Not with us, but, at the same time we were in Spain. She was in a different city. But despite the fact that she was an American in reasonably good health, living a retirement lifestyle in her favorite city in Spain, she still managed to be miserable. And in the last, year and a half of her life, when she was kind of in the process of ultimately dying of cancer, after she got certain medical injections that are now famously connected with rapid and aggressive cancer, in the process of her dying while she was getting radiation and chemotherapy and surgery and all this kind of stuff, she said, for example, oh, well, this town has a museum, and I always wanted to go to that museum. And my wife and I were like, well, yeah, but you lived here 8 years. Why didn't you just go? So my mom always had an excuse for, even though she was living the life that she wanted in Europe, which was like a big social taboo in our family. Like the whole idea of Europe was just too extravagant. And that's part of the reason why my mom wanted to live and die in Spain was, I don't think she never said this, and she never acknowledged it. But I think this is part of what was kind of going on in the background, is she was defying her family by living in Spain. Just the act of living in Spain was defiance, and more power to her. I think that was great. But despite the fact that she had, defied the family law by having a better life, she was still living out a certain level of misery in the process of doing that. So anyway, that's part of what's kind of, another level of this whole conversation around art is to not be miserable and to live a good life and to be happy. Like I already said, my dad could have been a lot happier than he was. And, nothing I could do could ever change the way that he wanted to live his life, even though I certainly tried to invite him and inspire him to just lighten up a bit, and be happier. Same thing with my mom. And the experience, of course, was sad for me to watch both of them just live their lives and die the way that they died. But certainly they could have been happier, and they weren't happier. And through the experience of watching them be unhappy, I decided this a long time ago. I decided this when I was in my maybe 18 or 19 years old. That's when I decided that I was going to live differently and live better than my parents and grandparents. And so that's part of, what I'm trying to communicate in the videos where I talk about art. It's not simply talking about art, but living a good life and being happy. And, whatever that means for you individually, or whatever that means for me individually, those are things that we have to reconcile and accept and come to grips with and process and integrate. A lot of people talk about being happy, and they're not. They talk about being healthy, and they're not. They talk about living a good life, and sometimes they can project that onto other people, like, you should be happy, you should live your dreams, you should whatever, but they themselves don't do it. So I'm trying to break that cycle in my own family, and I'm trying to help for those of you who are out there who need to break that cycle. I'm trying to, communicate this to you about understanding, the different layers of the process, and it doesn't have to be complex. I mean, I make it complex because that's how I am. And so, for me, looking at art or buying a piece of art can be a complex and exhausting process. But on the other end of that process, I get something out of it, And sometimes what I get are things that I wasn't expecting to get, So anyway, maybe some of this will resonate for you, or you can think about it and maybe come back to it later, and maybe it'll resonate for you later. But anyway, the homework assignment for right now, whether it's today or this weekend or this week or this month or this year, is to eventually give yourself space and permission and time and a little bit of money, if that's what it takes, which it usually does take, to, have beautiful things in your life. It doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, obviously you have to, we all have to start with something. I remember when I first started buying like these little trinkets of art, I was living in Seattle. And I remember, this is a good story, and I'll close with this story. It's a little bit funny, but not that, I guess it's a little bit funny, whatever. So I was living in Seattle. I had just graduated from Bastyr University Naturopathic Medical School, and I was studying for board exams because I graduated in September, and then the next round of board exams, I think, was in January or February. So I had a few months. Of being poor and trying to focus on studying. And so I was walking around downtown Seattle and happened upon this antique store, and I went in there, and it was a modest store, but they had two wood carvings that I liked. They were just modest little pieces of Chinese peasants. And I remember looking at him, and the owner of the store was, kind of watching me and trying to obviously talk me into buying things, and he eventually did. But I remember looking at these, and they were $50 or whatever, and I said, well, I can't afford it because I'm studying for board exams, and I'm kind of miserable, and I don't have any money right now. And he said, well, if you're stressed and miserable, that's precisely the time that you need beautiful things in your life. And I was like, you're right, I'll buy it. So anyway, think about it. That's all I'll say. Hope you're all doing well. So behind this video is going to be a few pieces of video that I put together this morning, using some voiceovers, and then concluding with the conclusion of the other video that I did on art. So anyway, just watch it or don't watch it, or let it play in the background while you're cleaning house or doing exercise. But maybe you'll get something out of it. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye.
The implication of buying yourself nice things is that you are worthy of having nice things in your life. That your life does not have to be ugly or boring. That you can have things that you enjoy simply because you enjoy them. That you have aesthetic needs for beauty and culture. That your internal needs are more complex, perhaps even more sophisticated than the garbage culture which surrounds you.
1. If you hold art and creativity as a value, then put your money where your mouth is and buy real art. Support the artists who create art and the vendors who support the life cycle of art. Create, purchase, enjoy, resell.
2. Always try to buy real art, not copies and not fakes. Buying cheap copies of fake art is an insult to the original artist and an insult to the creative process and discipline of years of work that should be honored throughout the cycle of art.
Buy art that has meaning for you, your life, and the future that you want to live into. Don't buy art simply because it is good, but because it has specific and special meaning for you personally. You can use art to gain a better understanding of yourself, to find missing or undeveloped parts of yourself, to find images of a better life that you can create.
Buy art that has meaning for you, your life, and the future that you want to live into. Don't buy art simply because it is good, but because it has specific and special meaning for you personally. You can use art to gain a better understanding of yourself, to find missing or undeveloped parts of yourself, to find images of a better life that you can create.
So one last time, and then I'm going to close this out. Put your money where your mouth is. Try to buy original art. Don't be a cheap ass like my own father and having the money and then buying cheap copies. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's an insult to art. That's an insult to art, you know? Put your money where your mouth is. Buy real stuff. Engage in the cycle of art. That's a better way it's a more accurate way to say it, more complete way to say it. Engage. If you love art and if you love music, engage with it. Buy the real stuff. Don't just copy it. Like it. Make sure it's within your budget. And, you know, ideally it would have some meaning for you. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. That's the video for today. And I'll get this on the website as soon as I can. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Tendur di Paloma, com sapatinho, Wilson do Sandro também. Fofa com Jéssica. Que se liga cuida na boa, como estira na minha nome, para que com brinca com minha nome de nome. Que se liga cuida na boa, como estira na minha nome, para que com brinca com minha nome de Palilho, lembra, a terra sagrado, Cacheu da Silva, a Mitêmia, Pipichão, terra de Cobiana.